You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Business owners and entrepreneurs, why isn't your marketing working? How can we quickly and easily fix that? With us today is the founder and CEO of Ugly Mug Marketing, Wayne Mullins. He's here to share his tips and tricks, his journey through entrepreneurship, and give us some action items so that we can be better entrepreneurs. Wayne, thanks so much for joining us today.
What's going on, Chris? Thank you so much. I'm excited for our chat.
Hey, thanks so much. Really happy you're here. Tell us about your experience through entrepreneurship. You've been in business for 15 years. What was your experience prior to that, and what led you to the creation of Ugly Mug Marketing?
Yeah, so my experience prior would be I have always been entrepreneurial minded. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was inherent from birth, but as a young boy, sound like an old man saying this, but as a young boy, back when I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, back then, baseball cards were a huge thing. So myself, my friends, we all were collecting baseball cards. And I discovered very early on that my friends were interested in certain teams, certain players that I really didn't care about. And those players and those teams were very valuable to them, but not valuable to me. And so what I would do instead of just trading cards, I would trade them for aluminum cans. It's called different things in different places. I think maybe up where you're from, maybe soda pop or pop cans. Down here, everything's a Coke. And I would have them collect cans, aluminum cans, and then I would trade them the cards they wanted for those cans. I would then take those aluminum cans and go sell them and make a few bucks on every bag of cans that you bring to the recycling place and sell. So that was probably my first endeavor into entrepreneurship. And that kind of entrepreneurial bug has been with me throughout my career, throughout my journey. And a big part of that transition, though, for me was going into sales and learning to sell. By nature, Chris, by default, I'm very much an introvert. I love to go hide in the corner. I don't want to be bothered. I just want to do my thing. I want to do work and get it done. But going into sales, going door to door, having doors literally slammed in my face, really helped me hone some very valuable skills, not just for selling, but for marketing and for entrepreneurship.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love the premise of exchanging something for value, something that didn't have value to you, giving it to someone who appreciated that value, and then found, okay, what is not valuable to them that they can exchange that has value for me? Just a very clever business endeavor. And it's funny that you mentioned, you don't know if you were born with it or what family genes you had, but it seems like entrepreneurship, not everyone is kind of built or born for that. It's very specific to the individual. So the fact that you've had success from this is incredible. The 15 years at Ugly Mug Marketing, what do you guys specialize in? Is this all things digital marketing? Are you websites, SEO, social?
Yeah. So at Ugly Mug, we specialize in a little bit of everything, which I guess makes us more of a generalist than a specialist. You know, my background coming from sales, I started studying direct response marketing when I was doing selling. And so I would use those direct response skills to actually book appointments for myself to get me in front of certain prospective clients that I wanted to meet. I became really good at that. And then I decided to go out on my own. I started a lawn and landscape company. Now, for those not from the South, not from Louisiana area, the quote unquote grass cutting season, if you will, goes for about 9 months out of the year. So there's stuff to do 9 months out of the year. The worst part about this is it gets ridiculously hot, ridiculously humid here in the summer times. But over the course of a 3-year period, I grew that company from startup to the largest in our region. Now, during the course of that, one thing that I think made a huge difference for me was that I didn't view my role as CEO, the operations person or the founder or any of those things. I viewed my role as the chief marketing officer. Everything I focused on was marketing. And it was out of those ideas, those strategies that I put in place that I started having clients of the lawn care company come to me saying, hey, we see how fast you're growing. What are you doing? Can you teach us how you're doing that? And that eventually led into me selling the lawn and landscape company and starting Ugly Mug Marketing.
Well, congratulations on building that successful business, becoming the premier leading landscape company in your region. That's incredible. And then to focus then on a different passion, this expertise in marketing that you have. Since we're on the subject of marketing, I feel like a lot of us entrepreneurs or business owners struggle with the marketing, it doesn't come as natural, and maybe they don't have the passion for it. Why is it that our marketing isn't working? And is there anything we can do to fix this?
I think, Chris, one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs, business owners is that we often aren't clear about what this thing called marketing is. Marketing's job is to make sales unnecessary. In other words, when we think about our marketing as the preconditioning, it's getting people in the buying mood before we ask them to make the buying decision. If we think about it through that lens, it allows us to think more strategically. It allows us to not be reactive to what we see our competitors doing or the people across the street doing. And instead, it allows us to be proactive, where we sit down and we think through, what actions do I need to take? What messaging do I need to say? What do I need to do to position my business or myself in such a way that it makes it almost impossible for people to say no when I ask them for the sell? If we step back and we view it through that lens and don't ask the question, should I be on Facebook? Should I be on TikTok? Should I be on LinkedIn? You go down this long list that never seems to end, right, of social platforms. If we instead step back and we say, what do I need to do or say to get the people that are likely to benefit from my product or service to be ready to say yes? We can then align all of our marketing. We can figure out what platforms to show up on. All of it becomes so much simpler when we actually step back and think strategically versus reacting.
That's a really good point. I love just the perspective that you put on that. And it makes a lot more sense as opposed to focusing on the sale. That's like when we're chasing the money, and it's not really building relationships or providing value. We're kind of preconditioning that client for the potential sale. Whereas if you focus on the marketing, what message can I deliver? How is this going to help them? That really just helps you focus in on who your ideal client is going to be, what messaging they want to hear. And then from there, what channels they're on, and then how to kind of build that relationship from there. I think that's super smart. You mentioned social media marketing. I think a lot of people kind of struggle with social media marketing. It's either too salesy or it's not salesy enough, or the content just isn't really captivating or engaging. Is there anything that we can do to help fix that?
I think there's a big misnomer in the marketplace that we are doing social media marketing. And the reality is, Chris, that very few people actually do social media marketing. If you listen to the name social media marketing, there's a key word in there, and that is social. What most of us are doing is not social media, but rather digital media. So in other words, we show up and we throw up our message, right? We just show up and we kind of vomit all the things we want to say, and we want people to hear about us onto these platforms, onto these pages. The word social means dialogue. It is a two-way conversation. Digital, on the other hand, is a one-way conversation. It is a monologue. It is where we show up with a megaphone and we scream at people our message, and then we complain that they're not responding, that they're not interacting, that they're not engaging with us. And the truth is, it's a very fundamental thing, but what we give off in life, what we give out, is what we receive back. So if we're showing up just screaming at people, metaphorically screaming at people on these platforms, and we're not showing up where they are, we're not engaging in dialogue with them, then we shouldn't expect them to engage in dialogue back with us. So it starts with this kind of self-examination. Ask yourself, am I actually doing social media marketing, or am I showing up and throwing up, right? And I think when we're honest with ourselves, more often than not, we are doing digital marketing. And then we're complaining that quote unquote social media marketing doesn't work. And here's the thing. It doesn't work because we're not doing it. If we would actually do social media marketing, it does work. And that's the beauty for those who understand this.
That's smart. It definitely gives me a new strategy on how I want to implement and put posts out there. So now we've kind of defined our ideal audience, and we're refining that message and who wants to hear it, who gets the value, the social media aspect, engaging in more dialogue, something that actually engages with our clientele. They're finding more about us and want to find more information on who we are, how we help people, the price point, everything about our website. Does everybody need something bright and flashy and something that draws attention? Is good web design important? Are there other factors we should be considering?
First of all, I can't answer the question as a blanket statement or a blanket answer for everyone. So I don't believe that every single business, every single organization needs a website. Even though we sell websites, that's part of what we do. I don't believe that it's a requirement for every organization, every business. What I would say is this, that when we think about our website for what it truly is, that will help us understand what it needs to do. And I often say that if your website were an employee, you would have fired it long ago. You see, most people have a website simply because it's quote unquote the thing they have to have or the thing they have to do. And in reality, we don't give enough time and attention and credence to what role does this website actually play in our marketing process. And we love to think of websites, particularly like the homepage of a website, as an airport terminal. So the job of the terminal is to help you get to your gate as quickly, as easily as possible, to make sure you're at the right spot at the right time so that when they call you to board the plane, you are there to board. So if you think of your website as the terminal, and then each of the pages as a different gate in your airport, that will help you think structurally about how you need to position things away from your homepage. And then the second thing is, I would say this, that if you have a website, if you decide it needs to be a part of your marketing plan, there are 5 questions, we call them the critical 5, that you need to ask yourself about every page of your website. I'm going to run through these really quick, but these are worth diving into. These are worth spending time reflecting on each page of your website. So I don't want the fact that I breeze through them really quickly to minimize or marginalize the importance of these questions for the success of your website. So question number 1 is who's here. We have to understand who is on each page of our website. So you think about it, someone who lands on your homepage, Chris, that's a different person than someone who's on your contact page. Now, I mean that metaphorically. In other words, if someone has gone from our homepage to our contact page, they are now in a slightly different mindset. They are there for a different reason than someone just on our homepage. Or if someone's on our about page, right? It's a different person. Or if someone is on the shopping page checking out, it's a different person. So number 1, who's here on this page? Number 2, what do we want them to do? Like, what is the purpose of this page? Is it to inform them? Is it to call them to action? Is it to get them to fill something out, to click add to cart? What do we want them to do? The next one is, how do we want them to do it? So, is it a click of a button? Is it to fill out a form? Is it just to read and learn more? How do we want them to do this thing? And then next question we have to ask is, when do we want them to do that? So it's not always an answer of we want it done now, like right now. There's certain times, certain reasons, and certain strategic ways that it may not be immediate action, right? We may be getting them to a certain page on our website so that we can then run retargeting ads off of that particular page. So the call to action may not be coming until later when we do maybe a product launch or something like that. So when do we want them to take the action? And then the last question, probably the most important question, is why should they care? We know why we want them to take the action. We know why we want them to click the button, make the phone call, do the thing. But why should they, from their perspective, with the 1,000,001 things going on in their lives, why should they take the action that we want them to take? So those are the critical 5. And if you're going to have a website, you need to answer those questions.
That's fantastic. That is the ultimate foundation on how we kind of explain someone's experience through the buyer's journey. They're kind of finding more information, figuring things out. They want to learn more. They find more about what you're doing. And again, they have different intention based on what page they might be on. And with that, we need to provide them different set of instructions. What are the next steps? You're here for this reason. Let me provide that next step or the reason that you're here and take you through that journey. Something important that we need to start implementing on our websites, because there are some that lack the call to action. They don't really explain what it is that they do or why people should care or take that next step. So it's something that we need to just be focused on. Have there been crucial mistakes on websites that you see happening more often than others, running through a campaign or you're redoing a website and you're like, wow, it seems like everybody is lacking in one certain area?
Do you mind if I share a brief story?
Absolutely. Please do.
Yeah. So I want everyone listening or watching to think back to 2007. Think about how old you were in 2007 and maybe what you were doing, what your life looked like in 2007. So in January of 2007, in Washington, D.C., here in the US, on a cold January morning, a man steps off the subway into the terminal. in downtown DC. Now, this is in the business district. This is where there's a lot of attorneys going to work. There's a lot of C-level, C-suite executives going to work. And this man has a case in his hand. And as he slowly steps off the subway, people are rushing by him to get to work because it's just before 8 a.m. And they almost knock this case out of his hand. And he kind of stumbles his way over to the corner of this terminal. He sets his case down on the ground. He unlocks it, opens it up, and pulls out a violin. Now he puts the violin up to his chin. He's about to begin playing, and he reaches into his pocket, takes out some crumpled dollar bills, and drops them down into the open violin case on the floor. For the next 43 minutes, this gentleman plays some of the most difficult, some of the most beautiful violin music that's ever been written. And at the end of the time, nearly 1,000 people had rushed by him on their way to their office. He scoops down, bends down, and looks into his case and begins counting the money. And he's earned $33 over the last 43 minutes. Now, when we hear that, that's not bad money for a street performer, right? $33 for 43 minutes of playing, not bad. But here's where the story gets crazy. You see, that same exact gentleman 2 nights before made $115,000 per hour playing the exact same songs on the exact same violin. And his name is Joshua Bell. And this is a true story. This was an experiment done by the Washington Post in 2007. And here's what's so fascinating about this. It's the same songs, the same number of people, the same instrument. It's like a multi-million-dollar violin. I don't even know the name of it. Very expensive violin. Same number of people pass by who hear this music. And yet 2 nights before, he sold out Boston Symphony Hall and made an average $115,000 per hour playing the songs. And yet 2 days later, he makes $33 an hour. And I share that story because of this. The difference is the frame built around him. You see, 2 nights before, when he was at Boston Symphony Hall, he had posters up about the event. There was tickets for sale. There was a symphony behind him. There was the venue, right? Boston Symphony Hall, this huge, beautiful venue, high end, people in tuxes, right? There's certain images that come to mind. So the lens through which, the frame through which we see that and hear that makes him infinitely more valuable for the exact same music he played standing in the subway before. And so that's a very long answer to the question. But what I would say is that it is so important that you understand your audience and that you carefully craft the frame around the way you're positioned. And this is important. The frame are the elements, all of the ingredients that you can control to manipulate, to help influence the way that other people perceive you. And you do have power, you do have control over those things. But until you acknowledge that you have power and control, you will complain that people don't pay you enough. You will complain that people don't treat you with enough respect, your product, your services, whatever you do. And yet, you have the same power, you have the same control as those who charge 5x, 10x, 20x, 100x what you charge for the exact same thing.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And I do remember hearing about that. 2007, I was just graduating high school. So that was a cool moment to step back in. But it kind of shows you the importance of the context, the time frame, the setting that you're putting together. And it's almost as if he wasn't speaking to the right audience. These were busy people on their way. Specifically, when he was at the hall and the venue, those were people who wanted to be there. They were looking for an experience. It's that frame and that setting you put together. Same reason a bottled water is 30 cents from the grocery store, $2 at the convenience store. At a venue, a stadium, the price keeps getting higher and higher and higher. And it's all about what people are willing to pay, that value. It's the same bottle of water, but I think it's a great experiment that they put together with the violinist because it kind of shows the same exact things. It's just a different time, a different place, a setting. All of that plays a role into how people perceive the value that you're bringing them. Now, for a lot of us business owners and entrepreneurs, we are one person shows. We are putting on all the hats, doing everything that we need to do. But trying to lead ourselves and direct ourselves, it's a challenge. Is there a way that we can kind of lift ourselves up to lead ourselves, to just kind of teach us some leadership lessons?
Yeah, I think, Chris, one of the most difficult lessons that I've had to learn as a leader is that the most challenging and difficult person that I will ever lead is the person who looks back at me in the mirror every morning. It's that person that gives me the most excuses. It's that person who tells me it's okay to put it off until tomorrow. And here's the crazy thing. Like, we wouldn't tolerate those same excuses from a team member, right? We would call them out. We wouldn't want them to be on our team. And yet we tolerate those excuses from ourselves. And the reason for that is we judge ourselves based on our intentions, but we judge other people based on their actions. And that is a very powerful leadership lesson that when I am in an environment where we have 12 full-time people here, if someone comes in late to work, they show up late to work, my natural default is to judge them based on the action, right? So the action is you're supposed to be here at X time, you were after that, therefore you're late. But I need to understand the intention. Maybe their kid was sick that morning. Maybe they had a flat tire. Like, there's a long list of things, right? Their intention was to be here on time. But yet, in our snap judgment, I'm judging them solely based on that action. Now, obviously, there's room for, is it a habit? Is it a pattern that's developing? All those types of things. But I think that's very important for us to remember because it helps us to stay focused on what matters most. And at the core of all leadership, all relationships, it's this word called trust. We live in a world, we live in a society, particularly here in the States, where our default is suspicion. Our default is not to trust people. And so it's really hard as a leader to train yourself, to teach yourself to default to trust. One of the very first conversations that I have with people when they start on our team is this: hey, we're different than most organizations you've worked at. Our default is to trust you. You have complete trust. In other words, we completely trust you to do the things you say you're going to do, to show up in the way that you've committed to showing up. We trust you. You have to earn distrust. You have to earn suspicion. So when you tell us you're going to do something and then you don't do that thing, you have now robbed a little of that trust that we've given you. And you have to work to replace that. So don't blow the trust that we've already imparted on you. The way that most organization works is the polar opposite of that is we do not trust you at all. You have to completely earn our trust over the course of years or months or whatever that may be. And so as leaders, as people who want to move from just ourselves doing everything on our own, we have to start there. We have to start by understanding that we have to default to trust. We have to build powerful, mutually beneficial relationships, and those are always built on trust.
Absolutely. And we can't build these relationships on distrust here, especially when you're going into it. If you were guilty until proven innocent in a similar situation where it's like, can't I get kind of just a level playing field? Why don't I start off with a little bit of respect and then we build off of that based on your character and your morals and the actions that you take, as opposed to having to earn the respect or the trust that you're trying to build? I think it just creates a better culture all around. Now, how do you build high performance culture? I mean, you have a team of 12. This is quite the operation you have going on. How do we get high performers?
Yeah. So first of all, it sounds very easy to rattle off a few answers on, here's how to do it, but it goes back to this one word, and that one word is culture. So Ugly Mug Marketing, we're in our 15th year now. And for the first probably 6 or 7 years, I always said that culture was going to be a thing that I got to one day, right? I had so many other issues, so many other things to take care of, that culture would come when we had time and money. And the reality is the time and money never comes around for culture. You see, culture is shared. It comes from the same Latin word as the word cultivate. And so the question is, what are we cultivating in our organizations? What type of environment are we actually cultivating in? And to jump to the end and then come backwards is this: that if you are not intentional about building a high performance, self-accountable culture, then you are unintentionally building a low performance and a completely unaccountable culture, or a culture where you're having to micromanage the whole time. And so when you understand that it's not about ping pong tables. It's not about fully snacked snack bar. It's not about all the perks and benefits, right? It's about creating an environment where people can show up and use their unique God-given abilities and gifts to their fullest extent to help you accomplish a vision and a mission. So the hint in this whole thing is that there has to be this balance between alignment and autonomy. Alignment, meaning if your team is not fully aligned around the mission, the vision, and the values, then you have no chance of having a high performance, self accountable team. And so the question for anyone listening to this is, does your team even know your vision, your mission, and your values? If they don't, then you have no chance. So for me, for many years, I spent years saying that one day I would spend the time to do the mission statement. I would spend the time to do the vision. I would spend the time to do the values, but that was a one day thing, right? There was too many quote unquote real things to deal with besides all these touchy feely things. And so I kept putting it off. And what I can tell you is when you actually know how to utilize those things, how you teach and train around those things, they become a keystone, a corner piece, a linchpin, if you will, in your organization in building that. The flip side is autonomy. We want to, in our organizations, entrepreneurs, we would love to turn people loose and have them use their abilities. But one of two things happens. Number one, we tend to micromanage. So some of us are wired more to micromanage people, to question everything, to have them report back to us every little detail. And then the other half of us are wired to where we just kind of wash our hands of it and let them go run, do things. And then they bring it back and it's terrible. And we complain like, what in the world were you thinking? Why did you do it this way? This is garbage. So then they're frustrated because they just poured their time and attention into this thing. We're frustrated because it's not what we wanted. And so when you have the alignment, you can have the autonomy. You can set them free to do those things. But without the alignment, you're always going to vacillate between micromanagement or just complete abdication where your hands are off and then you're frustrated because it's not done correctly.
That is so insightful. What are the action steps that we need to take to find that balance? As we as leaders and business owners, do we need to provide the direction, give them the tools and the resources, and then let them take it from there as opposed to just hands off, no direction at all, and not breathe down their necks as far as touch points within how are you at in this project?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really great question. It's a really challenging question to answer succinctly, but here's the best I can. So, first of all, most employees show up at businesses and they don't even understand the game of business at all. In other words, they don't even know the game that they're playing. So imagine, we talked briefly before we started recording that you happen to be a Packers fan, but imagine that you were in charge of the Packers and they all show up at practice and they don't know what game they're playing. Is it football? Is it baseball? Is it soccer? Is it tennis? Like they don't even know the game they're playing. And you say, go out, guys, and let's give it our best, right? You're not going to be successful as a team, as a coach, and the players are going to be very frustrated because they're going out and doing their best, but they're playing the wrong game. So you have to make it clear what the game is. And we define that as two things. Number one, the mission. Why do we exist? And then the vision. What is the future state, the future desired company that we are attempting to create through our actions today? So we start with those two pieces, and that helps define the game. This is the game that we're playing. The mission is this. This is why we exist. Now, the next part of that is we would say, okay, we've told them we're playing football. But imagine for a second, imagine a football field with no lines on the field. There would be no way for the people to know, for your team to know when they got a first down. There would be no way for them to know when they scored a goal, right? It's just a big field and they're just running up and down with the ball, right? You don't know if they've gotten a first down. You know, it's down 1 through 4, but like, do you ever get a first down or do you just keep running in a circle? Like, what do you do? But that's exactly what we do as entrepreneurs. We show up, we have our people working in circles day in and day out. We try to motivate them, we try to incentivize them. And then we wonder why the team's disengaged. We wonder why they're scrolling on their phone half the day. We wonder why we're frustrated. You see? So we have to define those things. And the way we do it is we take and we say, okay, we know the mission, we know the vision. What are we attempting to accomplish this year? And then we take that goal and we break that down and say, okay, based on what we're trying to accomplish this year, what are we trying to accomplish this quarter? So we define as a company what we're trying to accomplish this quarter. Then what happens is for us, each department owns a piece of that goal. So social media department says, I'm going to commit to X dollars in revenue this quarter. The website department says, I'm committing to this goal this quarter. And then under those goals for the quarter, we identify 3 lead metrics, keyword lead metrics. The default for most of us is to identify lag metrics. So lead metrics are things that lead to certain outcomes. In other words, they're the inputs. Most people by default, when you have them set these objectives or these goals, they're going to default to the lag metrics. So it takes some steering, it takes some coaching, it takes some education to get them there. But each person has identified 3 lead metrics that they're committing to that are going to help their department reach the goal. And then each person then gets a piece or a portion of that with 3 lead metrics under that. So again, what we're creating here is we're defining the game, we're putting the lines on the field, we're then allowing them to establish their goal lines, we're then allowing them to quote unquote call the plays that they're going to execute on in that quarter. They then each week make commitments. This week, my commitment to execute this next play is, and so you can, which I know sounds very kind of vague and ominous maybe here, but through this process, what we're doing is we're building a team that is aligned around a vision, aligned around a mission, aligned around goals, and then they are buying in. They're holding themselves and their peers accountable to accomplishing these things.
Wayne, that's fantastic. That provides so much more clarity, and not just because it's a football reference, but I feel like it was a perfect metaphor. I don't know if this was off the cuff or if this is something that you've spoken before, but that was the perfect metaphor on how we are kind of defining the mission, the vision, the culture, the things that we're building, the playbook, the calls, the metrics, the measurements, everything that we're putting together. It has alignment. It creates focus and clarity for the team, for the leadership team, for everyone involved. Now, Wayne, where can people find out more about your business, get in touch with you, and connect to learn more?
The simplest place is our website. That's just uglymugmarketing.com. All of our contact info is there, social, all in one place. If they want to follow me kind of more on a personal side, where I share kind of more, leadership stuff, I share more insights into some of the struggles of being an entrepreneur, being a leader, growing a team. You can follow me on Instagram, and it's at Fire Yourself.
I love that. And we're also going to have the links down in the comments, show description for everyone to check out and get easy access to Wayne and all of his connection social profiles here. Wayne, you mentioned before we started recording that you love the podcast. You love podcasts, you love books. You weren't even like that big into music because you appreciate that knowledge that you're attaining. Are there certain books, podcasts, or channels that you would recommend to any entrepreneur that's really going to help give them some clarity and help them reach the next step in their journey?
That's a challenging question. Maybe the most difficult one for me, Chris. I'm an avid reader, avid learner. And so my default is always like, oh, the book I'm currently reading is the absolute best. Everyone needs this. But one of the things that I've had to learn, and this has been difficult for me, is that as a reader, as a learner, what often happens is we're reading a book and the author maybe mentions a certain book, or we're listening to a podcast and the author mentions a book. And so we run out and grab it because in the moment it sounds good, it sounds exciting. And so we end up with a stack of books and we read through these books, and they aren't the books that we need in the moment. They're the books that we needed based on a feeling that we had when we were listening or when we were reading. And so what I would do is I would challenge people to think about where you currently are in your entrepreneurial journey. And I would challenge you to think about where you are trying to go. And I want you to envision what your future self needs to learn to become the type of leader, the type of entrepreneur that will own and operate the type of company that you want to have in the future. I love to lean about 5 years into the future and say, okay, what does Wayne need to think like? What does Wayne need to know 5 years in the future? And so I would challenge people to use that mentality. I'll give you an example. For me, over the last several years, I've had to lean really heavily into the financial side. I hate finance. I hate numbers. It's not what I love. But I know based on the size of our company and based on where we're attempting to go, that I better get good at numbers. I better have a good understanding of financial reports. I better understand how to make decisions off of financial reports. So, anyway, super long winded answer to your question that I didn't even answer. But what I would say is two books that come to mind. Number one is a book called The Mountain Is You by Brianna Weist. It's a book about overcoming self sabotage. So, not specifically a business book, it's more kind of personal development. Really, really useful book. And then the other book that I would recommend is a book called Straight Line Leadership. Very blunt, very direct, very to the point. So, two opposite extremes there, but both great books.
Wayne, super helpful. When is your next speaking gig? Are you speaking to a crowd of thousands in the next couple of weeks? Because I will buy a ticket. Very inspiring, very insightful. I'm going to be following all your social profiles here. I tell guests, hey, we're going to record for 25 minutes, but we're at the 45 minute mark and it feels like 15 minutes. Like there's a bunch of things I would still want to ask you. But Wayne, we're so close to the end of the time. Any last tips, tricks, or words of advice you want to share for other entrepreneurs? I love the books that you shared. I think those are super helpful as well.
Yeah, the last thing I would say, Chris, well, two things. Number one, if you want to do an event and have thousands of people and invite me to speak, I'll be there. So there you go. Number two is just simply this, that consistency creates miracles. And so often in our lives, we as entrepreneurs are notorious for not being consistent. I am certainly guilty of this. I would challenge you to begin working on small little disciplines and being consistent in those disciplines. Don't make exceptions, don't make excuses. Exceptions become the norm. So, consistency will create miracles in your life, in your relationships, and in your business.
Wayne, you're the best. Love you, man. You're fantastic. For those of you who want to learn more, check out Wayne and the links in the description here. Wayne, thank you so much for all of your time sharing everything with us today. Super insightful. Love your history. Love your aura. Keep up the great work with everything you're doing.
Thanks so much, Chris.